Do you believe in your gut feeling or a higher being? Welcome back to After Hour Happy Hour. We are your chaotic but cathartic co-host. I'm Vicky.
I'm Jamila.
I'm Sharon.
So today's topic is a little more interesting one, and also don't really know Sharon's and Jam's stance on this, but to touch a little about the concept of like, do you believe in your own gut feeling versus do you feel like there is a higher being or higher power out there that kind of like guides your decision? What is everyone's stance?
So for me, I don't believe in a higher being at all. I believe in, I guess, gut feeling, if those are the only two choices. But at the same time, I wouldn't call it gut feeling. I would call it past experiences. I will make my decisions based on past experiences, based on what I already know. But in the case that if it's just between gut feeling and higher being, then gut feeling.
For me, I think it's very interesting because I'm influenced by the way I grew up, obviously. So I grew up going to church. So at one point in my life, I did believe in a higher being, but I am no longer religious, I think. So I wouldn't say when things happen, I believe it's a higher being. So maybe it's more intuition or gut feeling, but at the same time, maybe it's because of the tendencies I had growing up. I do find myself sometimes being like, oh, thank you, quote unquote, God, maybe, or someone out there.
I'm the exact same way. So I always like question it because I also grew up going to church. My dad's side of family is Christian, so they would sometimes take me to church, and like at one point I even went to church camp. And so like that's the only religion that I was really exposed to. I would say the other side is like Buddhism, but I feel like for me Buddhism is more like principles than it is a religion itself. And so when it comes to like I guess a low or whatever, do I pray or do I trust my gut feeling and stuff like that? And for situations where I'm so desperate and so hopeless, a part of me does pray, but it also comes from that's the only religion that I was exposed to growing up.
I think it's actually really interesting for me because when I was in Hong Kong for first grade and second grade, I went to an all-girls Catholic school. So I actually did the prayers every night and stuff and believed in it. But then when I moved to the US, my parents we don't believe in any religion. We don't believe in a higher being at all. I think living with them, they really influenced me that there isn't a higher being and that yeah, there are people who believe in it, but for us personally, we just never believe in the higher being at all. So I was just raised that way that even now, whenever I'm like struggling or hitting a low, I've never resorted to a prayer or kind of hoping from the higher above, oh, please help me with this. I've never done that.
Do you believe in like signs and stuff? You know how when you're in your low or when you're just looking for an answer, you're just like, this is a sign. Do you believe in that?
I'm trying to think of past examples, but I don't think it's ever crossed my mind that, oh, this is a sign to do something. This is what I need to do right now. I think everything that I do stems from, I guess, more of a plan or what I want to do, not because I'm looking for an external signal.
That's so interesting. So even at have you ever feel like you've experienced a super low point in your life? I feel like you have, right, Jams?
I feel like I've experienced low points as well as moments where I'm wondering, oh, why is my life like this? Or just bad moments in my life. But I've never resorted to feeling, let me kind of pray to the higher being and have them help me out. Because what I think is, what can I do to fix this problem? What can I do to get out from this low?
That's so interesting.
Okay, question. So, I mean, it might be difficult to answer because maybe you've never been in a life-death situation, but has there ever been a situation in your life where something incredibly bad could have happened, but it didn't, and you think maybe this was the way it was meant to be? See, that might not be, oh, it's God or a higher being, but maybe a thought process is, I lived or I survived this because I was meant to, kind of thing?
Me. I have. So that's why this question is so interesting to me because I've had that. So like even though I've grown up going to church and all that stuff, my parents themselves are super atheist. I don't know if that's the right term, but they just don't believe in anything. And they're very similar with jams where it's your self power or whatever to do something. But third year, when we were all living together, this is my story of why I am so iffy, is third year when we were living together, there was one weekend that the whole apartment, because you guys all had a retreat, was not home. So it was just me by myself. And that was the first time I've ever been in that apartment by myself. And so it was Saturday and I was cooking and like doing all the things I normally do and I was about to go to bed. And I was laying in bed. And for some reason, my whole body was like, you need to get up. You need to look and like walk around the apartment just to check. And even before I went to bed, I checked all the locked doors and stuff because I was by myself and I didn't want to sleep with like an unlocked door. And so I made a last check and I went to bed. But when I was laying in bed, something was just not letting me sleep and was telling me to get up. And I was like, what is going on? Like, should I just YOLO and just walk around? So I got out of bed even though I was like fully ready to sleep, and I made a whole walk around the apartment, and I realized I never turned off the stove. And I never do that. I always turn off the stove, but I could have just slept with the stove on. And so in that moment, I was like, what told me to get up? Is this a gut feeling, or was this someone protecting me to make sure that I don't sleep with the stove on? And from that moment, that was like my turning point where I was like, whoa, I had no reason to get up. I already checked all the locked doors. I just, in that moment, I was so shook because I didn't have a reason to get up. I genuinely did not remember that I didn't turn off the stove. You know, I already did the last checks and everything.
Okay, I will respond to that after Jam goes, but I want to know Jam's answer to my question.
The only thing I can think of is when I ran to a pole really hard and hit my head. But even for that, because that was the most I ever bled, to a point where I felt like I was gonna faint. But even with that, I didn't think, oh, it was a sign that I meant to live. It was just I didn't hit it hard enough that it was dangerous.
That's so interesting. I really want to know if I would still feel this way had I not grown up going to church, you know? So maybe I wouldn't, but in response to Vicky, I would say that's gut feeling, just because for me, I think I distinguish the two as gut feeling when I generally just have a feeling. Usually, when I resort to thinking about a potential higher being, it's when it's my own life in danger, I think. Because, for example, I've been in 2 near death situations in terms of driving a car. And with the last, why are you laughing?
That's not funny, but also like you're driving. Are you?
Was this during college?
One was recently. The first one was when my dad was driving and it was raining and he was fumbling with the AC to turn on the heat, so he was slowing down a little bit. And in that moment, had he not been fixing the AC, the car that spun out from the rain would have hit us for sure. So in that moment, I was like, that is not a gut feeling. Is someone protecting my life kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the second one was, it was when I was driving and basically something with my reverse and drive wasn't working when I was making a UE. So we almost got rear-ended kind of thing. So I think gut feeling is more, should I go with my gut, should I not? Versus I think it's when my life is not in control, is it a higher being kind of thing.
When it's out of your power, but it still happens in your benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I can't distinguish the two because I don't believe in a higher feeling. So everything I attribute to, I would never think of higher being as a reason.
That's so interesting.
That is. I wonder if that will change for you when something happens that's out of your control. Like it's something you can't do yourself, you know, how, for example, for Sharon, in those situations, you can't control if a car is going to hit you or not. If they do it kind of thing.
I think for Jam, it's just, it is what it is. Like whatever happens, happens, right?
Yeah, I don't think anything will really change me or shift me to a point where I feel like, oh, someone is out there protecting me. Like I would try to put myself in the situation of your near accident. And I was just thinking, if that were to happen, I feel like in my head, I would just think, okay, we got really lucky that we were happening to slow down. But I would never think someone is out there protecting me.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you believe that whatever happens for a reason then?
I know Sharon's an avid believer of
Yeah.
this. I think in a way, but I think for me, when something is happening, I always feel like there is a cause to it. There's always a reason behind it.
But don't you believe that that stems from like a higher thing that's
No,
controlling it?
I'm just trying to think of all the things that happened to me in my life, and I feel like I could put a solid reason behind everything. And that reason isn't because someone's protecting me. I think you might need to give me like situations of this and that, and maybe that could change my mind. But thinking from my personal life of everything that has happened, there's never been a reason where I felt like a higher being was out there to protect me, or I ever went to a higher being to seek for protection.
Since I'm a believer and everything happens for a reason, when things happen and I'm like, this was meant to be, I don't necessarily think, oh, it's a higher being or a God. I think to me, I interpret it as something in the universe aligned where it was meant to happen.
Yeah.
So it's less religious and more of, I guess I believe in signs or the universe working out the way it is. So I think I'm more in between Jam's stance and your stance.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, I also feel the same way. So jams, you see it as like protection, or when you're in danger and you need protection, then you pray, right? But it could be anything. So I guess a situation I'll give you is, for me, I believe being rejected from UCLA and UC Berkeley was a sign from the earth that I should be going to UCSD because that was the best decision I made for myself, right? And so in that situation, that was, well, it partially was half my ability of like as a student and stuff, but also everyone knows that college admission is kind of like a toss up. You could or couldn't get in even though you tried your hardest. It's not always like X, Y, and Z. And so for that situation, all I can think about is, oh shoot, like this happened for a reason because I lived my best life 4 years at UCSD, and before I was like a little sad that, oh, I didn't get into UCLA and UC Berkeley, but in the end, now after experiencing it, I'm like, that's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
See, for me, when I got rejected from UCLA, I was thinking, oh, that's because I didn't work hard enough to get the grades
Mm.
or get higher SAT. I put a reason behind why I didn't get in. And then for you, you chose UCSD because of the 2 rejections. And you felt like UCSD was the next best choice. But for me, I want to go UC Irvine. And then I got into Irvine, but it was my brother who told me to go UCSD. So there's also a reason behind it. I didn't feel like it was a sign that I was going to go UCSD. Does that make sense?
That's
Interesting.
So do you ever, Jams, as someone who never really believes in this thing, wish that you did because it might ease the pressure on yourself? Because
No.
right now your mindset is very, oh, it's my abilities, and if I didn't get it, it's my fault. But if you have a reason to put the blame on, it makes it easier, right? Do you ever feel like you wish that you believed in it?
I'll say no, because let's just say I didn't get to UCLA and I say, oh, because it's my quote unquote my own fault because I didn't work hard enough or certain things. Okay, that's a me issue. That's something I need to continue to improve on. Where if I put it on a reason that's, I guess, outside my control, then
It's denial.
that doesn't make sense to me. Yeah.
It's like putting the responsibility on someone else when it's your own responsibility.
Yeah.
I feel that.
This is just like a Jam interrogation session. But I have a question. Okay, so I don't know about Chinese culture, but Korean culture stems around praying or not worshiping, but respecting your ancestors. So when it's like an anniversary of someone's funeral or some tradition or holiday, we give thanks, we pray to our ancestors who are obviously no longer living. So whether you're religious or not, I think people do believe that your ancestors are still present in your life. So I was going to ask, is Chinese culture like that? And if so, maybe more specifically for Jam, do your family or parents do that for your ancestors?
Okay, so growing up when I was living with my grandparents, they're super Buddhism. So I feel like I fully believe in that stuff and believe in everything until I moved to America where my parents were like complete opposite. And that now that I'm older, I haven't been as active as when I was younger. But every year there is something called a Qingmingjie where my parents do go to, clean up the tomb or just pay respects to our ancestors. But when we go, it's more of we're paying respect and visiting you on an annual basis instead of feeling like, oh, my ancestors are here to protect me, or even speaking to your ancestor, your grandparents, like, oh, please protect us, is more like, hope you're doing well up there, not to like protect us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I feel like in Chinese culture, there's also times where, actually, I don't know. Do we look to our ancestors for answers?
I think some people do pray to the ancestors, like, oh, like, what would be the answer? Like, can you give me a sign or something? But for me personally, our family don't really do that. And when we go pay our respect, it's because it's part of Chinese culture and we respect our ancestors, respect our elderlies. That's why we do it.
Yeah. So recently, my grandma is her tomb, or I don't know. It's not a tomb. It's like in Chinese culture, it's at temple, and they have the name and a picture there, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
she's buried is not the right word, but she is in Arizona. So recently, I visited it, and at that time, I talked to her. Like I do believe she could hear me. Like I believe that they're listening to what you have to say. Whether they do something about it is out of my control, but I believe that they're listening and they are taking in your prayers, quote unquote, when you talk to them. And I believe in that.
I think maybe also because I don't have a close family member that has passed away yet, knock on wood.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's why I can't relate to that as personally, but maybe perhaps in the future when that happens, I could see myself talking to it. But like Vicky said, it's another thing if they do something about it.
Yeah.
Okay, follow-up question then. I don't know if this is really religious, but do you believe in the afterlife, kind of? Like once you die, do you think that's
Mm,
it?
I don't think that's it. I think there's an afterlife. I don't know how it looks because there's different variations. There's like reincarnation. Are you born into another person, or is it like once you die, a baby is born and that is you type of thing? I don't know what that looks like, but I do believe that there is an afterlife.
I don't believe there's an afterlife.
That's so interesting. So once you die, that's like,
Yeah, I feel like once I'm done with this life, I'm done.
That's so interesting because I don't know which I would prefer actually if I just want to rest in peace kind of thing. But I feel like a part of me believes in some aspect of reincarnation, whether it's you are born into a different life or something where you just don't remember your past life kind of thing.
okay, question. So, specifically for jams, do you think everything has a scientific reasoning behind it then?
I don't think everything has a scientific reason behind it. I don't think I'm like logical in that sense, but I feel like most things there's a reason behind it, not necessarily scientific, but a reason. And I think with the whole afterlife thing, is not that I don't fully believe in it, but in the next life, you don't remember your past life. So technically, isn't like this life done? I feel like that's how I thought about it. So that's why my answer is saying, no, I don't believe in afterlife because technically my life is done in this time period. And in the next life, it's another life. And I don't remember anything from the previous. So I just want to quickly add in, I think the one thing that I would believe in is fate. Your
Mm,
fate to maybe meet someone or your fate to meet the love of your life or a friend. I think that's what I would believe in. That's more outside of like being practical.
Yeah, maybe it's because I believe in things like law of attraction or manifesting. But going
yeah.
back to the topic of gut feeling versus higher power, I guess, then do you guys have a lot of gut feelings in your life? Because I feel like I don't.
I want to say I've had a lot of moments that I followed my gut, but I'm still very practical about it. Like I'll break down pros and cons, but at the end of the day, if I'm so split on an idea, I'll trust gut for it.
I think I believe in gut feeling, but I right now I can't think of a scenario where I can fully say I went with it because it was a gut feeling.
I feel like I've heard so many stories about people like chucking it up to gut feeling when they're in danger. You know how there's so many human trafficking stories about how girls are walking around in stores and suddenly they just have a feeling that they're in danger and they're they say that they need to leave. And things like that, where you honestly have no other reason to do your certain action but this like gut feeling. I believe in that your body and this primal instinct in you knows how to protect you versus, actual practical scientific facts.
I agree.
See, I agree that I guess we have this feeling of, okay, we need to get out of here. But at the same time, I wouldn't say, oh, I did because I had a feeling. I would say because I was in this environment and I was noticing these things that led me to my conclusion that I should get out there. So yes, in a way, it's gut feeling, but I'm not saying completely I got out there because I had this feeling. Does that make sense?
But I think I'm just referring back to Vicky's example of the whole stove thing. I think that's a real gut feeling.
Yeah, I think for me, that was a toss-up between, was it my gut feeling or was it a higher being? But also, I also believe in this scientific background of your body knows and remembers things more than your actual brain. Because using that situation is like my hand or my body just remembered that I didn't turn off the stove, and that's why I had such a lingering feeling in me that I need to go check something because I don't remember doing that action and my brain just didn't remember it.
Fun fact, I heard this from a different podcast, but the reason why it's called a gut feeling is because your gut has more neurons than your brain. So it's almost like a second brain that remembers things for you when your brain can't. So that's why it's called a gut feeling, and you make decisions based off that. So I thought that was super interesting.
Right? I feel like this is such an interesting question because one, I did not see Jams being so practical about this stuff, but also it's so many reasons and options and decisions.
I think in relationships, when we talk about relationships and stuff, I feel like I'm the person, in relationships, like emotional versus logical, right? And I'm the person who's like emotional. And that's why I also mentioned earlier, I guess the only thing that I kind of more believe in is like fate, where it's outside of my control of meeting someone or meeting the love of your life.
That's also the universe bringing you together.
Right?
Yeah, so
Oh, she's saying she does believe in that.
So in that and fate and like meeting someone, I think I do believe that. But I think outside of it, where we're talking about practical and versus on the other end of the scale, like a gut feeling / higher being, I'm a lot more on the side of being practical.
All right, so let's interrogate Jam some more. Do you think that meeting me and Vicky and starting this podcast is fate?
I think it's fate that we met, but
Aww.
which I guess like led to this podcast. So yeah, I do believe that there's fate in meeting people. If I chose UCI instead, or if Vicky didn't reach out to me. So I think in meeting people, I do believe there's stuff outside of your forces.
All right, we'll end it at that. We'll take that. Just kidding.
Yep. She loves us. There we go.
So that was our conversation on gut feeling versus higher being, but also just interrogating Jam the entire time. So leave your comments down below of what you think, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.